In this episode of Careers That Matter, I'm joined by Judith Bosire, who is the chief economist at Vancity. Judith, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
What is the job of chief economist at a financial institution like Vancity?
So I often get this question, and I find it quite fascinating because there's so many ways to say this. For example, it can be say, "Oh, I just drive the economic strategy for Vancity." But I think a better way to really position it for people to understand is think of a weather forecaster, for example. When they're telling about what is going to be happening in the weather, what they have to look at is what is the humidity level, what is the cloud cover, and all these other elements that they're looking at in order to be able to say it's going to rain tomorrow and be partially cloudy and so forth.
Right, and you're also taking into consideration where we are in our orbit around the sun, what's the tilt of the axis, and there's so many factors, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So if you take that example, what I do as a chief economist is really very similar, but instead of looking at the elements of the weather, what I'm looking at are economic trends. I'm looking at what is happening in the economy, what are the risks within the current market, and who are the players and what is really impacting them. And by looking at those trends, I'm able to really position and understand, okay, where are we going, where are we seeing those pain points, where we're going to be landing in terms of growth and so forth. So that is really the simplest way I can put my general role.
That's a tremendous number of inputs. So you're gathering information that's both local, regional, national, and international.
Absolutely. You have to, and more so at this point in time, the international elements of things or data, which we used to take as to be external elements that really don't impact how we look at the economy, and now actually part and parcel of the baseline of what we have to price in. So that is like really changing the context of how the work is happening.
So do you do that work alone, or do you have a team?
Right now, I am working alone. So I run the shop alone, and getting a new team member soon that will be supporting a number of elements that I drive forward.
Okay, how many hours a day are you working to be able to distill this information? Because it must be nonstop.
I'm working smart. So by working smart is leveraging different tools and really being able to focus on what matters, because there's so much noise in the economy. If you want to chase that noise, you easily get lost in it. So I just go to what are really those core elements that matter in terms of what is driving the economy for everyday people. And you asked a very good question. How am I different from the other bank chief economists? I mean, one of the elements that I find missing, and which I'm proud to be able to be part of Vancity to represent, is that in most cases, we forget that the economy is just it's not about the numbers, it's about the people behind it. And what I try to do in a lot of my thought leadership, in a lot of my work, is really driving those numbers down to the people and say, what does this mean for you as a household? What does this mean for you as a small business that we serve as our members at Vancity? And that reality sometimes is very disconnected, right? And how do I help them understand and be able to have informed decision to help them understand why their grocery, dollars are not going as far as we spoke about as they were, as it was going before, so elements like that.
Mm-hmm. So what does your day look like? Do you have a certain routine where you go, okay, I'm checking this, and this, and then do you go sit and think about it, or how does a day unfold for you?
It shapes really differently depending on what data I expect to come into the market. But the beginning of the day is all about listening to the headline news and kind of understanding, did something happen overnight? Did Trump execute the 50% tariff he mentioned? He tweeted about, things like that are not expected as part of the economic data release schedule, to be able to see, okay, what's happening there. And then I'll kind of then be able to zoom into, what are the key things driving the economy this week that I need to start working on in terms of thought leadership. But in between that, a bigger part of my role is actually being out there in the community, to, talking, giving economic updates about, what are the risks I'm seeing in the economy, what lens am I applying in terms of analyzing the impact of the economy or the state of the economy for our communities and businesses, and really sharing that knowledge broadly to different platforms, to forums, conferences, panels, and so forth.
So in addition to doing interviews like this, you've got quite an outward-facing role.
Absolutely.
And is your sort of direct report to the CEO then, or to the executive team?
I report to the executive team, right. So I report to the COO, and that's how it builds up to the CEO.
Okay, let's go back to where you went to in your high school or second level of education. I'm not sure where you grew up. And so in different jurisdictions, we call it different things.
Right.
But you're graduating from that level. Did you go, I know what I want to do when I grow up. I want to be the chief economist at a collective financial institution in Vancouver, British Columbia?
No, I think I had a big dream.
Which was?
But I don't think quite it aligned directly with Vancity in terms of where to end up, but it is sort of within the same range. So I'll kind of build up to it.
Okay.
So I grew up in Kenya, so in Western Kenya, particularly in a small town called Kisii. So that's where I did all my schooling from grade school until high school. And then I won a scholarship to go to study in the States. One of the things that I was already passionate about was the fact that in my community, we used to have a lot of international organizations coming in to do like clean well waters and pit latrines and so forth. So my immediate thought as this was happening was like, if they're smart enough to come and do it here, I need to go figure out how they learn to become that smart so that I can come and do it myself. So there was already that passion around how can I make my community better? How can I be the one activating that change instead of having others coming in to activate a change? So that led me to go to the US to study my undergrad, which was in economics.
Whereabouts? What school did you go to?
I went to Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts in the Pioneer Valley.
Wow.
And so did my undergrad there. And as luck had it, I ended up getting my first job on Wall Street in Merrill Lynch on the sales and trading floor. Far away from my economic development space, but it opened a different world for me, a world of global markets and how capital markets work, which had not crossed my mind before. I remember one time calling my parents when I actually got the job offer, and called my parents. I was like, "Oh, hey, I just got a job on Wall Street," and they were like, "Wall who?" And I was like, "Wall Street, the one you see on TV." They're like, "We don't know that. Like, we don't know what the Wall Street is," but they were like, "Is it paying well?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's paying well." That, "Oh, we're happy for you." And that was kind of that reality for me in terms of like, how do I shape things as a trendsetter for myself and others? Because I did realize that for my parents, what mattered is it a well-paying job that enables me to achieve other things in life?
Of course, they're parents, and they want you to be safe and well cared for. How long did you do that job, and what did it lead you to next?
So I did that for 2 years, and this was kind of at the mid of the financial crisis until the sort of past the financial crisis.
2008, we're talking.
2008, 2009, 2010, moved on to do my first master's degree, which was in financial economics, and this was essentially tailored on to understanding, more about economics and global markets, like what is that intersectionality. Ended up actually getting a job at Columbia University, which was dealing with kind of creating sustainability programs and economic empowerment for communities along the Amazon in South America. And I was a project manager for this program that sort of reignited my initial goal, which was like, this is the kind of work I want to do. I want to move in economic development. So I moved on to come to Canada, and I did my master's in international development at SFU, Simon Fraser University, armed with that thinking that, now that I'm getting this master's in international development, I am going to go to an international think tank and change, institutions and the world. But what really created a change for me was when I did a co-op that led me to Little Wat First Nation up north of Pemberton.
Yeah.
And I was doing an agricultural strategy for them. And I got to that community and I was like, I do not understand that we're in the same country together. So that for me was what changed my international trajectory to becoming a Canadian journey. And because I was like, okay, if this hasn't been figured out in terms of how to have that equitable economic development for such small groups of people, how can we change an entire country and make it a developed country? And so for me, that question led me into management consulting and starting to do work within Canada. I started off at an Indigenous-owned economic boutique consultancy that was dealing with a lot of major projects across Canada in terms of, the right to consult and providing economic analysis for Indigenous communities.
Which, of course, became very important post the Silcotin decision.
Absolutely.
And so suddenly there's all these economic opportunities that are coming to First Nations where they hadn't necessarily been presented with them before. They needed the kind of insight that you could bring.
Absolutely. And so I had the privilege of being part of a number of these pipelines, kind of working with specific communities alongside to understand, how do they negotiate their agreements, impact agreements, and how is proper consultation or duty consult undertaken, and how does that feed into the broader economic growth story for Canada? Moved on from there, ended up at a mid-tier organization, MNP, and then at Deloitte as a senior economist. And then an opportunity came up to actually work with the federal government, but leading economic development initiatives in the north. So I packed my bags, moved to Iqaluit in Nunavut, and started my work of really understanding the northern space. My portfolio covered all the 3 territories, so it was really good immersion into what is Canada's north, how is the growth story different, and how do we reposition as I guess from the government's standpoint in terms of activating growth within this area. And I was there for 4 years before Deloitte, before an opportunity opened with Vancity, and then here I am.
So what do you think it is about your willingness to take on like new and challenging positions that were maybe a departure from what you were doing previously, but you said, no, I can do this. What do you think it is about you that says, bring it on?
I think I can look at it in 2 different ways. One of them is obviously the fact that for me as an immigrant, it's always easier. I guess the fact that I had to leave my own home and start afresh in a new country, I think there was a level of resilience and tenacity created because of that. And that makes me more open and accepting of new challenges that a lot of people be like, you're moving from Vancouver to Iqaluit? It's like, what's your problem? So to be able to do that and see the opportunity in that. And I think another element for me was that ambition of being able to say, if I want to understand Canada, I need to understand Canada as a whole. So having worked with Indigenous communities, having worked with government, industry, then there was the North. And before I was there, I did not know what a seed lift meant, And then all of a sudden, if I am a consultant at Deloitte, how is my information grounded in the full wholesomeness of what I'm supposed to do when I do not understand the lived experiences of the some of the areas that we serve? And so the reality in being on the ground was really eye-opening for me. It really expanded that thinking for me to understand, what are the challenges? Are there ways that we can change this story for the North?
So in the arc of your life and your career, how important has your own intellectual curiosity been in moving you forward?
I think it has been very, very central to my moving forward, because that element of learning something different, learning something new, I feel has been like one of the core drivers. But I think underneath that is that desire to be like, is this enough to help me change the story that I knew about developed and developing countries, right? That framework that had already been established in terms of what is needed in order to transition from one to another. Do I have enough knowledge to be able to say, yes, it can be done or not be done? And I think that curiosity has been a part of that story.
Well, you're a remarkable example and an inspiration, I'm sure, to so many who will, relish in your story. Like, what a remarkable story. And
Thank you.
You're doing incredible work. Thanks for giving us an insight into your job and, and the path that led you to it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Hi, I'm Anthony Originello, CEO of the Chartered Professionals in Human Resources for BC and Yukon. We represent more than 8,000 members, and as the organization dedicated to advancing the HR profession through education, advocacy, awareness, professional development, as well as our recognized and impactful CPHR designation, we are proud to be a sponsor of this show. We have been the voice of the HR profession since 1942. Learn more about us at cphrbc.ca.